My name is Noah Lopez. You are watching episode number 4 of the Noah Lopez podcast, and today we're going to talk about a pretty interesting topic. So I want to talk about standards. So if you think about it, this is going to be an analogy that I use to give you an example of standards. When you are a baby, you are immobile. You don't know how to walk, you don't know how to move, you don't understand really anything mechanical about your limbs or how to use your body. So for mobility's sake, the first thing that we all learn how to do is crawl. We all learn how to crawl as our first level of progression as far as mobility is concerned in life. And we go from crawling on all fours. You might even do the little bum shuffle like the dogs do, where you sit on your butt. I bypassed that as a kid personally, but I've seen stranger things. Anywho, I digress. So you go from crawling to walking. You start to get some stability in your legs and learn how to get on two legs and on your hind legs and support yourself without using your hands for extra leverage and balance, right? So, and you're standing on your own too, and you get to walking. Now you're walking, and you're going from point A to point B. And you start to pick up speed as you gain strength in those muscles from using them over time. You start to run, you start to sprint, and if you continue down this level of progression, you can go to skipping and jumping and climbing and vaulting and catapulting, and who knows, there's flipping and acrobatics and gymnastics and what have you. There's so many levels that you can take it to, and dang man, we just got some company. A young family just showed up to the ball field of the dugout that I was sitting in and wanted to ring off some practice balls and as a family, so I just gave them their space. Anywho, after learning how to walk, you don't ever wake up and just decide to crawl one day. You know, that's not something that happens. You don't just wake up one day and forget how to walk or completely disregard it altogether, because you've established a standard. You've established something that you do, a level that you've progressed to, that you remain at, that you will not digress or regress or recede behind. And I think it's interesting how we are very intellectually or logically inconsistent when it comes to applying or upholding those types of standards in other areas of our lives. Kind of parallel to examples that we have in nature of things just naturally growing. You look at flowers, you look at a seed, it sprouts and starts to grow roots into the soil, and those roots drink water from the dirt and moisture, and it begins to grow and sprout. Trees planted by water thrive and bear fruit in season. We see clear signs of progression pretty much everywhere in nature. Yet in our own lives, we often skip stages or go backwards. Just like a child doesn't wake up and decide to run a marathon without first crawling and walking, why do our standards in relationships, thinking, or character so easily go out the window? There was this quote I heard from Malcolm X. It was, "A man who stands for nothing will fall for anything." In other words, if you don't drop an anchor, you're always going to pretty much go with the flow. It's important to establish these standards in areas of our lives, such as standards of behavior, intellectual standards of intelligence, things continuing to learn, standards in relationships, types in communication, what you expect to receive from another person in a relationship, what standards what precedents are you setting? What expectations are you establishing for yourself and sticking to? For instance, I've been trying to wake up at like 5 a.m. since I was in high school. I'm currently a 30-year-old man. And I remember hearing early on about like CEOs and high performers and athletes, people that would wake up early before the sun and had a morning routine that they swore contributed a lot to their success in whatever field they were in. And hearing that, I always wanted to wake up. And sure, throughout the course of my life, I've had some early mornings, maybe some strings of consistent days or some weeks of waking up in spurts. But for the most part, I haven't been able to get up that early on a consistent basis. And therefore, I haven't been able to establish a consistent standard in that area of my life. You can also apply standards in business. From a professional standpoint, when you're talking about standards, we're then referring to standard operating procedures, which are known as SOPs. You essentially find the most efficient way to do something for operating efficiencies, right? Which will then increase profitability, which is the whole point of going into business. And when you find those perfect or those ideal ways of doing things or methods of performance, you want to standardize those things. You want to create a standard in your business that becomes a regular practice for existing and future employees. And this is important to get the most money out of your business. You need standard operating procedures. So that's an example of standards from a professional standpoint. But how about from an ethical standpoint? Standards of behavior. Do you lie? Do you cheat? Do you steal? Do you rob? Generally, I would say most people should not do these things. Ethical standards. And there's this proverb that I read that I thought was pretty interesting in terms of the vivid imagery that it describes this in. So check this out. It's Proverbs 26:11. And that says, "As a dog returns to its vomit, so fools repeat their folly." Other translations, like a dog that returns to his vomit is a fool who repeats his folly. And think about that. Why does your body vomit in the first place? It's rejecting something that is either toxic or harmful to it, or cannot be digested or processed. So as a result, your body rejects it. So the same way that I would say a dog vomiting in this example or in this analogy would be equivalent to us getting rid of some type of toxic behavior, right? Because it's saying like it's using a fool as an example. The dog is a fool in this example, and the fool gets rid of his foolish behavior, his foolish ways, the toxicity inside of him, and then comes back, like the dog returns and eats his vomit back up. Ugh, it's nasty. That's vile, man. That's not cool. So it's really is the same exact thing. You get rid of a bad behavior, and you circle back and come back to it and fall right back, whether it be out of convenience or fear or who knows. There's a variety of reasons, but for whatever reason, force of habit might drag you right back into that old behavior, therefore making it difficult to establish or uphold a certain standard in your life. And while we're speaking from a biblical standpoint, and I also use the example of nature, things grow, right? I think this verse ties in perfectly to that, and I'd love to expand on that, because if we're talking about growing in life and maintaining and upholding and developing new standards that give us more life and better and easier ways of living and more efficient ways of loving and impacting other people and nurturing relationships, you want to uphold those standards, and you want to grow into more life. And this is what it. This is the code right here. This is the secret code, the cheat code. It's John 15, 1 through 5. I am the vine. You are the branches. Whoever abides in me, and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. Beautifully said. I think there's another part of this that says when a branch is disconnected or detached from the vine, at which point it can no longer continue to bear fruit from the vine because it's no longer attached to the root from the source that gives it its fruit or whatever it bears. It starts to decay, and it at which point is essentially basically can just be thrown into the fire. There's nothing else that it's good for. It's firewood now. Well, that's what we use logs for, right? So when you're detached from the vine and you can no longer bear fruit, at that point you may as well be cast into the fire. And very vivid imagery there. And in this example, in terms of practical application, if you're not connected to Jesus, to God, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, if you're not connected to the Lord, you can't bear fruit. You can't bear fruit. You're swimming upstream. You're going against the grain. You're running in circles. It's not going to happen. But it's as simple as being connected and saying yes to that relationship with Jesus and making a daily declaration that you're going to try to live in accordance to his will, that you're going to try to fulfill the purpose that he's put you here for on this earth. And if you don't know what that is, that you're going to pray and try to discover that purpose. But in the meantime, you can still love people. You can still be productive. And if we're talking about standards, I'm going to kind of not really segue, but jump around here. Like, what about physical standards? What about your health? You know, how this day and age we have watches that track our steps and every movement and all of our daily activities. So, you know, what's your standard? Oh, I got 10,000 steps today. Oh, I got 15,000 steps today. And are you generally staying or in that region or upholding that? I think it's important that we don't recede or retract back into negative behaviors, because you don't ever see that anywhere else in nature. When does a tree just say, nah, I'm good, I'm going to start shrinking back into the ground? It doesn't happen unless for some reason it doesn't have the conditions that it needs that are conducive to its life or conducive to growth. You know, it doesn't have any water, it's deprived of moisture altogether, and it's in extreme heat, and it's in harsh conditions. Those same harsh conditions, for the sake of that metaphor, are just like being away from God. You're in some extreme conditions that are not conducive to your health, that are not conducive to your growth, that are not good for you. You got to get back to the source. You got to be connected to the vine. And what's great is that Jesus always has an open door. Man, it's only by his mercy and by his grace that we have salvation, not by anything that we do. So I don't want it to be centralized on, outward observances, because faith without works is dead. And works are important, but they come as a result of where your heart is, not because you're trying to earn something. It's not by our power that we're given grace or salvation. But that's really relevant to my point, because you need to be in a space that you can grow in. The seed phase is just like the crawling phase. You're planting foundational standards, small beginnings like the mustard seed, and then sprouting and starting to root would be like walking. This is the next natural progression. Taking root, early growth, establishing consistency. Then you become a plant or a tree. Now you're running. steady growth, strength, visible progress. Flowers in bloom, it's like jumping. And these things resemble, or rather, these things mean maturity, beauty, and impact. And the next stage being fruit and harvest. You're bearing lasting results. Be healthy relationships, wise thinking, strong character, excellent work. Really start to self-reflect and evaluate and ask yourself where you are in that process and in certain stages, and there are certain fields or areas of your life, like where am I in work, where am I professionally, where am I relationally, where am I spiritually, where are my standards, or what is my behavior like for my fitness. You can start to analyze these things, and don't ridicule or condemn, but it's important to have this information. One of the most important fundamental principles in business is that you can't grow what you can't track. And that means that if you don't have a metric for growing something and you're not mindful of it and taking inventory of what that is, then you're never going to have a feedback loop to inform how you can improve that. So if you don't even know where you're at, how are you ever going to know if you improve? So it's important. Like I said, don't condemn yourself. Don't ridicule yourself. Sure, maybe you might have that kind of style where you prefer to be a little stern with yourself. I suppose that's fine. But just have that information. Get that information and start to ask yourself, where can you start to be a little more intentional in improving these areas of your life? And don't try to do it all simultaneously. I implore you to just start by getting in a good space to grow. Get in a good condition to grow. Know the Lord. Make that your foundation. Stay there. Stay close to the cross. It's very important. And once you're attached to the vine, now you're in a place where you can start bearing fruit. And now you're in a place where you're not restricted by self. And that's very important. Where can you start taking baby steps? Where can you go from a seed to starting to water that seed and get into bloom? How can you get to the next phase in a certain area of your life that you want to apply this methodology to? Knowledge is empty if it's learned and not applied. It's nothing if it's learned and not applied. So I highly implore you to not just watch this video, but really think about practical life application and how you can start to witness something transformative in your life. If you have any suggestions or comments, or even want to share some feedback about an area of your life that you're choosing to improve at this moment, or today you're making the decision to be more intentional about establishing a standard and upholding that standard and improving that standard in your life. And by doing that, you're going to encourage and influence all the people around you to want to start evaluating and improving their standards. So, without further ado, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a fabulous week, and I'm excited to see you on the next one. Take care.